To keep the Batman hype train rolling, after this video getting 13,000 views, I thought it would be a good idea to make another video on the Dark Knight. Obviously, now that I have a Batman audience, I must give the fans what they want. Batman Arkham Origins. Usually when you hear that name, what comes to mind is a disappointing prequel that is in the shadow of all the other games that came before it. A game that came out after its predecessor getting a Game of the Year award. Arkham Origins was set up to fail, being developed by WB Games Montreal, unlike every entry in the series being developed by Rocksteady. This really made it feel like the black sheep in the series. I mean, the game didn't even make the cut for that Return to Arkham remaster. It's as if they swept this game under the rug and completely forgot it ever happened, or they'd like to believe that it never happened. But due to lockdown and my city being shut down by an evil dictator, I've become so bored that I tried to boot up Asylum, City and Night. But since I played those games to death, I quickly closed application on all of them. Now, wanting to fuel my addiction for playing an Arkham game, but can't bring myself to play the others, it quickly sprang to me that I haven't played Origins since like 2013. That's like almost 10 years ago. So with that being said, I'm just gonna say it. This game doesn't deserve the hate it gets, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that thinks this way. Sure, it doesn't do a lot to differ itself from the other games, but it definitely has a personality of its own, and a lot of lovable traits. In this video, I'm not gonna completely praise this game, but I'm also not gonna completely shit on it. I'm gonna treat this game fairly and not harshly. The combat in this game really didn't innovate compared from Asylum to City. However, there's nothing wrong with this, as this game was more of a filler for the wait between City and Night. This game still incorporated a lot of new features for how this game was treated. In Asylum, it really felt like a prototype of the combat style, now going back and playing it. In Origins, really all the animations are the same except for a few. The only notable thing being the quick gadgets being a little different. Now being able to quick fire the remote claw. This works as a tether, stringing together an enemy or an object and watching it zoom off and hit them. And I guess you can count the glue grenades, but it's basically just a reskin of the freeze grenades and plays no differently. A new enemy type is now the martial artist, being able to counter your attacks. He can also parry your combat takedowns and forces you to counter more than once. Another enemy type is a miniature version of Bane, and when he attacks you, you can't counter unless you use your combat takedown to cut off their venom supply, making them normal thugs. These new enemy types help to make the combat more fresh, rather than spamming square aimlessly, attacking anyone within sight. One of the main differences in combat is the shock gloves. These are a super overpowered gadget acquired from the Electrocutioner. Sadly, these gauntlets are so OP it makes the game not as challenging, resulting in a less of a struggle with boss fights and thugs. With these gauntlets, you're able to hit through shields, armored thugs, and stun batons. They also do additional damage during boss fights. In this run through the game, however, I decided not to upgrade them as I wanted to challenge myself and thought it would be more fun, which it definitely was. But as a casual player or a kid, these gauntlets would be a lot of fun, but as an Arkham veteran, it's just too easy. Enemy types seem to be more on the offensive side compared to the last two games, as they will not hesitate to crowd around you and try to throw off your combo, rather than in Asylum and City, where they would just patiently stand around and wait their turn. I often found the combat to be very glitchy as well. I was sending an enemy to heaven very often.
What is this? It hurts! Boss wants... Nani?
The sound effects are a downgrade too, compared to bone cracking and powerful bassy strikes. We get more of a clang sound, as if you're punching plated armor. I mean, it would make sense for body strikes, but not when punching to the head unless they're wearing a helmet. A lot of the time, I would also point Batman in a direction to set him up to strike his next enemy, but instead of doing a jumping attack towards him, he'll punch the air and completely mess up my combo. So now we get to the stealth section of the game, and honestly, nothing's really that different compared to City or Asylum. I would have actually liked to see a fair bit of change to this section of the game, but I don't think it's too bothering to me. I guess they went with the approach, hey, if it's not broken, don't fix it. Once again, the only notable thing I can think of is Deathstroke's remote claw. But you can actually do some cool things with this gadget. You're now able to string people up to gargoyles. You can also send fire extinguishers flying at them to create a smoke pellet type effect. Other than this, the environments are quite cool and unique. and that's really all I can think of. Arkham Knight did have the fair takedowns, and other than that, I don't even see them having innovated on anything else. Origins probably did want to do some cool shit, but I'm sure Rocksteady was like, nah bro, you gotta like leave that shit for us to do. You know, you can't innovate too hard, because then otherwise we're gonna be stuck on what the fuck we want to do. Other than the fair takedowns, what else did they really do? I mean, there's the Batmobile, but like everyone fucking hated that. I think what Origins had space to do, they did well on. A pretty big issue with this game, however, is its open world. It's just an empty sandbox with building, enemies scattered, and fucking snow everywhere. It just feels underwhelming when traversing through it. In Arkham City, I could always tell what district I was in by its surrounding, but in Origins, if someone were to tell me to go to a specific spot, I would have no clue where I'm going without using the waypoint. I know it's a 2013 game, and a lot of games had this issue around the time, but it just felt too lifeless. One of the things I feel this game does better in than the others is boss fights, apart from Solomon Grundy and Joker. I'm kidding. I'm so kidding. I'm sorry. No, too soon. I'll be talking about these in chronological order. Only when it comes to the main story. I could honestly not be fucked playing side stories or collecting Riddler trophies. Fuck that filler shit. I've already done that shit 20,000 times. First up, we have Killer Croc. I think this is the best way to throw a boss fight into the introduction of a game, because it's easy but still entertainable. It's very newbie friendly because, well, I was a noob. Being an experienced Arkham console player does not translate well when trying to switch to PC. It was a bit of a challenge, and even if I did whip out the controller, it would still be cool to take the brute head on rather than sneaky stealthing around him like Asylum. The fight plays out like stun, beatdown, quick time event, evade, throw battering, a repeat. And for the first one of the game, it's simple yet effective. I am not counting this guy as a boss fight, but it was quite entertaining watching this cocky fuck get taken down with minimal effort with the press of one button. Deathstroke is easily the best boss fight in the series and gives you a serious challenge and threat. However, it's not my favourite, but I will give credit where credit is due. Slade is actually able to counter your attacks, and if you end up playing aggressively and pushing him near walls, he will flip you so he's not cornered. Pressing counter at the wrong time will also mean he gets an easy hit on you, allowing you to just not button match. Deathstroke also ends up dropping a smoke bomb and attacking you, just how Ra's al Ghul did in City. Not Ra's al Ghul. If you think it's Ra's, you're mentally ill. It's Ra's. Okay, back to my point. And I mean, it's fine, it's basically just a reskin, but it's not the main focus of the fight. The Batclaw in this fight is definitely your best friend, allowing for you to be able to pull him in and then clothesline him. The counters and attacks from Deathstroke then end up changing, freshening up the fight, while he also is starting to use the remote claw, demonstrating for later on how you can use it in combat. For Copperhead, nothing really stood out in this fight. You are poisoned by her, leaving you tripping balls, slowly walking around until you get to the boss fight arena. In this fight, you are then fighting multiple versions of her which all vanish upon strikes, leaving you with the last Copperhead, which you then damage until her health bar is depleted. It's very mediocre. I had nothing to talk about just then. It really just shows how mid that fight is. Next is Normal Person Bane, and not Meatball Bane for anyone who's confused. The fight basically plays out by stunning him then performing a beatdown. He then charges at you. This part of the boss fight is actually difficult because you have to perfectly time when you're going to evade. Because the window for evading is so specific, this often ended up with me dying a few times. Firefly's boss fight is also pretty good, making you throw a combination of batarangs, glue grenades, and using your Batclaw. It's a very nice variety of gadgets. You also have to evade Firefly's grenades, and I also found this pretty tricky. Now for my favorite, and the one I spent most of my time on, ladies and gents, I present Meatball Bane. Because of Bane now pumping too much Titan into his body, he is now too dangerous to attack head on. You must now, as Batman, stealth around him, sneaking through the floor and grates. And if you're lucky enough to be near these electric fence things, it will reward you with a takedown, electrocuting him, then you're able to get some hits in. At times, this boss fight is very scary and intense, because he ends up sticking his arm down the vent and ripping you out of the grates in the floor. Your detective vision also gets blocked, meaning you have to venture out without knowing exactly where he is, only using your ears to faintly understand where he could be. This leaves you with only being able to do stealth takedowns from behind, and also using the fire extinguishers to your advantage. I personally love this fight, and I'm not gonna lie, I also had to search up on YouTube like a walkthrough to try and actually like beat him. I was so lost, and it took me like 5 times, I swear to God. I actually sucked ass at this part. Alright, now for the story, which is easily the most controversial part about this game. The game takes place on Christmas Eve, but that does not mean the Batman can rest. Batman throughout the whole night is constantly tested not only by thugs he faces, but also the police, himself, and even Alfred. This game makes it clear to the player that this is a very young, inexperienced take on the Caped Crusader. If Alfred, his basically father figure, is objecting to Bruce doing this alone, then it just shows how fresh he is, compared to the other games where Alfred is witty, cracking jokes, and super supportive the whole time. Throughout the game, it's shown that Bruce is more feared because at this point in his career, he's merely a myth and legend. The fanbase really didn't like that the Joker was Black Mask. They felt wronged and betrayed, because after Joker dying in City, they were excited for a new refreshing story with a different member of the Rogues Gallery. If it were Black Mask, it would have made for a much better early Batman career story. I think the game is remembered so badly because of this plot twist, to be honest. But what we got was still good. It's a good tale of how Batman and Joker's relationship turned into this one-sided love-hate thing. Joker being so obsessed and baffled that Bruce wouldn't let him fall to his death, even after everything he's done, like blowing up that building full of people. I'm assuming the title of it being Origins is because it tells the tale of how the Joker fell in a deep love with something he can't understand. I really love these flashback scenes, and I thought it was pretty crack up how Harley thought he was talking about her. I can't tell if the Joker was manipulating her on purpose, or he was just expressing how he felt about Batman, and this dumb bitch thought he was in love with her. It's great to see that it's not just a Joker-Batman story though, as Bane and Gordon also play a big role. Bane's shown to be a match for Batman, and a huge threat, especially when he goes to the Batcave fucking shit up and killing Alfred. Though, this felt pretty empty because we know he doesn't die. Gordon's relationship with Batman throughout the 3 main Arkham games always felt like a partnership with a ton of respect. So it was cool to see at the start just how much Gordon hated the thought of Batman doing what he does and working alongside him. And over the course of the game, Gordon learns to respect Batman and work together rather than against each other. Because at the end of the day, though their methods aren't the same, their goals are. Alright, so here's my final thoughts. This game does not deserve the hate it gets, nor does it deserve to be so neglected and shoved under the rug. Sure, it doesn't innovate on much, but honestly, I don't even know if they were allowed to. I'm sure Montreal wanted to be more ambitious and make some cool decisions gameplay and story-wise, but all those things were probably being saved for Arkham Knight, and the few things they did innovate on, Knight didn't even want to use them, trying to separate themselves from this game that much more. In the short time that they had to make Origins, I think they did a pretty good job. I'm sure at launch it was very underwhelming after being delivered the best superhero game and one of the best games of all time, but if you take a step back and just appreciate the game for what it is on its own, I'm sure you'll actually have a good time.